President Trump says he has narrowed down his list of potential Supreme Court picks to 5 names.
We have 25 very outstanding people.
A shaken community mourns the loss of these 5 people.
Journalists, like all Americans, should be free from the fear of being violently attacked while doing their job. 6 months ago, we unleashed an economic miracle by signing the biggest tax cuts and reforms. Make America great again. That's what's happening.
The growing calls to abolish ICE.
This is a relatively new agency, but let us just admit that it is a failed experiment.
You know what ICE did just last year? They arrested 33,000 criminal aliens who committed all kinds of crimes.
Why did you leave my husband alone? Why are you separating families? Why did you leave my husband alone?
I've got one tough wife. I'm really proud of her.
Of summer. Oh, it is officially muggy, soupy in New York City.
Hot. It's smoky hot.
Well, that's because you're on the couch this morning, Dean Cain. We are so thrilled to have you. You're a busy man, but every chance we get to have you on, we enjoy it.
Well,
Very happy to be here.
we only had 2 of us here, and they were like, "Where's Dean?" And somebody said, "He's flying in."
Exactly. I'm finding with coffee because I'm still on West Coast time. It's like,
No, I think they meant like Superman.
oh, I got what you said.
Yeah. No,
It never gets
I
old.
can't
Ed.
come on the
It
show
never
without
goes
the
away.
mention of
It
Superman.
has to be. We love having you on the couch, and it's good to see you.
Yeah.
Pete's a family wedding this weekend. He's going to be back next week. We love him as well,
Yeah.
but we're going to tease
Not as
him
much.
a lot.
We don't love
He's
him
not
as
here,
much.
so we're going to tease him like crazy.
Not as much, that is for sure. And we look like we're going to prom.
Well,
today,
I
which is
did call
great.
you up and ask what color you're wearing today.
I'm glad
so-
you guys coordinated.
We do. We left you out.
Thanks for
Sorry.
letting me know.
But happy Saturday morning to all of you. And there is always a lot of news to get to. And the biggest news this week is the Supreme Court. And the president announcing yesterday a date of when he was going to pick his choice, but also the type of person that he is looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you had Justice Anthony Kennedy. This was just such a dramatic development, and it came after a couple of major Supreme Court decisions that went the president's in his favor, a union decision as well as the travel ban basically being codified by the Supreme Court. The president yesterday basically said, look, I've whittled the list down. There's less than 10 people from that original list of 25 that I really am zeroing in on. And he's actually in the neighborhood. He's not far from New York City. He's in Bedminster, New Jersey. And on his way here on Air Force One, here's what he said about what we can expect.
I'll be announcing on it tonight. We have 25 very outstanding people. I've got it down to about 5. I may have 2 of them come like the old days with Bedminster. Could be this weekend.
Are you looking for somebody who would overturn Roe v. Wade?
That's not a question I'll be asking. But it is a group of very highly talented, very brilliant, mostly conservative judges. Because I think, I won't be discussing that because I think it's inappropriate to discuss. I've heard outside of War and Peace, of course, the most important decision you make is the selection of a Supreme Court judge, if you get it. And as you know, there have been many presidents that never got a choice.
Yeah, and you can hear reporters there, Dean, already pressing him. Well, what about abortion? What about gay rights? What about this? They want to stir up a lot of these social issues because this president is about to put his stamp on the court.
Well, but you're not really supposed to ask those exact questions, are you? You're supposed to sort of dance around them and get an understanding. Listen, he's going to put his stamp on this court. He's got his second pick right now. He may get a third pick even in this first term. You never know. And it's going to reshape the court for a long time, so it's going to be a big fight.
Yeah, Chris Wallace said the other day, this might be the biggest moment in the Trump presidency. I mean, what an important moment for President Trump and what an important pick. And he's got to take his time to figure out who the person he wants in that court, but also bigger picture, instead of zeroing in on every issue that they're going to decide on how you think they will. Pick someone who you feel is going to make the proper judgment across the board on different issues. I was at a diner in Orlando earlier this week, and for most of the people I talked to, they say constitutionalists. They want someone that at its core is a constitutionalist. He's got a long list of people, a lot of strong conservatives on the list he can choose from.
2 women, in fact, as well.
2 women as well.
Right. And what they're saying on the right is, look, have somebody who has a strict interpretation of the Constitution. Don't make laws from the bench. That's what we've heard over and over the years. And finally, this president has the opportunity to make that a reality. So that's what the right is saying. On the left, It's basically a meltdown. If you go back to election night and the crying that was going on at the Javits Center because of the disappointment, and then about 24 hours later in the Rose Garden of the White House, you had the Obama officials with the long faces, those infamous photos. It was because they knew that it was going to be real and that Donald Trump would have a chance to make major decisions like this. And I think a lot of people on the left, like Michael Moore, have been, sort of crying in their beer and not wanting to admit that Donald Trump actually won. Now they're admitting he won, and they are just in desperate straits right now. Watch.
Listen, the Senate right now is 51-49. Come on.
Yeah, but
come on. I know we have to, right, we've got to push it off till after November. We first have to find ways to stop that vote from happening. I'll join a million other people surrounding the United States Capitol. I will stand there. I will put Bill, let me tell you something. This judge goes through for the rest of at least, all of our lives. It's a right-wing court. That's it. It's over.
Dean, I will say, at least he's been consistent. He has been against President Trump from the very, very beginning. And he has said from the beginning to protest. He has urged his followers to get out there to shout the way that they feel, and he's going to do that with the Supreme Court pick. Anthony Scaramucci was on our channel last night, and he said, everyone just needs to take a step back, take a breath. You got to calm down. Here's what he said.
People should just relax for a second and give him the opportunity to pick somebody before they start digging trenches again. So it's sort of weird. I was thinking about Justice Scalia. We were talking about him earlier today. It was 97-0. Justice Scalia was appointed to the Supreme Court. And so we're in a situation now where it goes right down the partisan lines. You had to go into the nuclear option for this situation. But in the meantime, if you think about the quality of the people that the president is going to pick from an interview, these are all exceptional Americans, exceptional people. And so I just hope we can just dial it back a little on the polemics, if you will.
Wow.
97-0.
It's unreal.
We're not going to see that this time.
You got a chance? You got a chance?
If I were a betting man, I'd bet against it. But here's my question.
Wow.
Okay, so Michael Moore was going to surround the Capitol with a million other people. If that happens, does that change anything?
No.
Doesn't change a thing?
Republicans are going to have the votes. And it was this.
By the way, he has every right to do that. That is what the Senator, if he wants to go protest, by all means, go do that. But it is a great point, Dean, of does this change the outcome? And does this change the president's ability to put someone in that he feels is best in that position?
Sure, but think about how much time the resist movement and the protests have spent on the idea of let's kick Sarah Sanders out of a restaurant. Let's do these silly things that are sidebars and don't really get at what this country is really all about. And now, with the retirement of Justice Anthony Kennedy, I think Michael Moore and others are saying, folks, wake up. Stop the nonsense. This has gotten real. And what has also gotten real is you have people on the left who are taking this another step further and are saying, we don't just disagree with ICE, which is basically trying to protect our borders, but we actually just want to abolish the agency altogether.
But it used to be, up till recently, those on the extreme left, right, calling for the abolishment of ICE. But now it's become more mainstream. Most recently, Kirsten Gillibrand, Senator of New York, here is what she had to, do we have the quote from her? But she basically said, we need to get rid of it and we need to start completely over.
Yeah. And she said we need to separate the criminal part of it from immigration. It's well, how do you separate the criminal part? It's about ICE trying to enforce the law.
And the law is as it's written, as the Congress makes the law, and they are enforcing the law. But it's not just Gillibrand. It's a whole chorus of other people on the left. And I noticed they all had B's next to their name. They're all Democrats there.
Good luck reading all those names.
9 sitting lawmakers. Those are 9 sitting lawmakers.
Here's what I want to know, though. Where was that anger under Barack Obama? Because you can take the separating of the families out of this, but much of it was the same under President Obama. Right. And ICE had to do very much the same thing what they're doing today. So where were the protests?
Gillibrand
where was the anger?
That her anger is that it's a deportation force, right? But to your point, Barack Obama was deporting even more people. Yeah. And you didn't hear Gillibrand saying, let's abolish the agency. And Kellyanne Conway is saying, look, ICE is actually doing its job, and they're trying to protect this nation.
Some of them are calling really for anarchy over authority. The Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement Agency in this nation is there to enforce all immigration laws, not just deportation, as Senator Gillibrand incorrectly and accurately states. They are there to protect all these laws. And you know what ICE did just last year? They arrested 33,000 criminal aliens who committed all kinds of crimes that would be mind-numbing to your audience. They also seized almost 2,400 pounds of fentanyl.
They also deal with more than just immigration. They deal with human trafficking. They deal with terrorism. So the question I would have for Democrats, if you want to completely do away with ICE, what do you do next? Where are the solutions? What are you going to put in place of ICE to fix the
Dan
problem?
Bongino has been saying that what President Trump has done is he's exposed what Democrats really want, is that they want open borders. And that is what Gillibrand is suggesting. She called it a deportation force. Let's get rid of them. So then who's going to deport criminals? Who's going to deport them?
Yeah. So Ari
Nobody.
Fleischer. Ari Fleischer is a Fox News contributor. I'm sure you know him, a former White House press secretary. And he put it very simply. He said a lot of Republicans want to abolish the IRS. A growing number of Democrats want to abolish ICE. That basically tells you all you need to know.
All right, right on point. Just drops it in there.
To go heading into the midterms when you've got Nancy Pelosi saying, look, elect Democrats and we're going to take away the tax cuts.
Well, yeah, we'll raise your taxes. I don't know if that's a really good campaign spot right there for her. I'm not so sure.
We'll see. You're out in California.
Yeah.
A lot of interesting politics out there.
Listen, I deal with that every day.
You got high taxes out there?
Yeah, really, really, really high.
Really high. All right, well, there's a lot going on this morning as well. I do want to bring you some other headlines, starting with this. A security officer on a school bus is stabbed to death by a coworker. The 37-year-old victim was sitting in the driver's seat of his truck during the attack. The shocking murder happening in a parking lot of Cal Poly Tech outside of L.A. The suspect, a campus custodian, was shot and killed by officers responding to the scene. Investigators are now looking for a motive. And Devin Nunes is ramping up his fight against possible government surveillance abuse during the 2016 Trump campaign. The House Intelligence Committee chair is calling for 17 DOJ and FBI officials to now testify on Capitol Hill. Among them, fired FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe and anti-Trump lovers Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Stay tuned for that. Also this, a federal judge blocks a controversial work rule for people on Medicaid. Kentucky's program requiring many patients to either work, volunteer, or train for jobs was set to begin tomorrow. The judge calling the first in the nation policy arbitrary, claiming as many as 95,000 people could lose their coverage. State officials are considering an appeal. And acting ICE Director Thomas Homan officially retiring. Homan telling Fox and Friends that he may be leaving his post, but he will not stop pushing for immigration reform. Listen.
I'm not leaving this fight. I'm going to continue to stay in this fight. I'll continue to fight in the law of California. I'm going to continue to fight against sanctuary cities. And as a civilian, I can say a lot more than I can as a federal employee. So I'm not giving this fight up.
Homan says that he planned to retire more than a year ago when President Trump tapped him to lead that agency. The acting deputy commissioner, Ronald Vitello, is expected to replace Homan. He's been on the show a number of times.
Very familiar.
Yeah. All right. Those are your headlines.
Well, coming up, the left gearing up for this massive battle over the Supreme Court. But will it backfire at the ballot box?
And President Trump touting 6 months of his tax cuts. But it's one woman who stole the show, and she joins us live next.
My family, we were able to invest in our children's education.
I tell you, the Democratic base is wired now for a revolt. This will be the trigger for it.
It's time for Democrats to throw down.
This is a battle line that has been drawn that literally will put women's lives at risk.
Understand, people are rising up.
Rising up days after the left denounced Maxine Waters for calling on the resistance to push back on Trump officials, not even let them shop at stores. The left's outrage is now shifting to President Trump's upcoming Supreme Court nominee before that he or she's even been named. Will this new rhetoric have consequences and actually backfire? Here to react, Derek Hunter. He's the author of the new book, Outrage, Inc. Good morning, Derek.
Good morning, Ed. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you on the program. What do you think about this week? It seems to me like it's been a turning point where if you think about last weekend with Sarah Sanders being kicked out of that restaurant, Maxine Waters talking about this is just the beginning, and then you had this series of Supreme Court decisions and now this nomination suggesting, you know what? Instead of some of that other side business, this president is about to reshape the court in a way, and the left is freaking out.
They are freaking out, and it's kind of, I find it funny to watch because they've been turning up the outrage meter to 11 on everything, and now it's something that they really should be outraged if they really believe what they believe, which they do. And they are at a point where you can't be more outraged anymore. They've topped out. So they've got everybody mad at everything, everybody emotional at everything, and now they're trying to focus this mob that they've created, and they're going to have difficulty doing it because the border is the worst thing ever. The Supreme Court decisions are the worst thing ever. Now the Supreme Court retirement is the worst thing ever. You can't constantly have the worst thing ever, and you've got someone like Michael Moore going on television saying we need to be prepared to put our bodies on the line to stop Trump.
Right.
We're heading to a dangerous place.
Yeah, what does that
That's what
even mean in terms of let's put our bodies on the line? And to your point, you think back to the tax cut debate, the president now celebrating 6 months of the tax cut. We heard from Nancy Pelosi and others, it's going to be Armageddon if this tax cut passes. People will die, she said. Here we are 6 months later. Is there an example of anybody who's died because of the tax cut?
No, and it was people were going to die because of the Republican health care plan before that, and now people are going to die because the Supreme Court could shift to the constitutional side. It is always on 11 or even 12 on the outrage meter because liberals need to keep people in a constant emotional state, because in an emotional state you're not thinking rationally, and rational thought is kryptonite to the left. So you're going to hear even more dangerous rhetoric. You're going to hear more people surrounding administration officials and yelling at them in public places. It's going to get pretty dangerous. And Michael Moore saying people were going to have to put our bodies on the line. Yeah. That's dangerous. Last night on Bill Maher, he said he's willing to surround the Capitol and try and block the Senate from voting. I mean, there's a level of insanity, and then there's Michael Moore. He's an island unto himself in many ways.
Derek, final question. Is there a chance here when you talk about blocking people in restaurants and whatnot that some of this outrage may now boomerang on Democrats so that it'll be Dianne Feinstein and other Democratic senators who have a vote here who may all of a sudden see the wrath of the left? You see some already saying, you didn't do enough to make sure Merrick Garland got a vote in the Obama days. Will the left start turning on its own?
It could. As I write in my book, Frankenstein's monster always returns to the castle. They've created this angry mob that is going out. They've fired them up. They've convinced a good portion of them that, you know, the next Hitler is occupying 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. That, if you really believe that, you almost have a moral obligation to do something, so that you would turn against people you see as insufficiently outraged would make sense. We're not there yet. It's a race, sort of, Ed, between will the mob snap before the November election or will the November election happen? It's a weird game of chicken the left is playing right now.
Absolutely. Derek, Outrage Inc. is a great book. I've just started reading it. Congratulations on that. You get bonus points, by the way, by mentioning kryptonite while we have Dean Cain on the show today.
I saw that, and that's what put it in my head.
It might have been on your mind. All right, Derek Hunter, we appreciate you coming in.
Thanks.
Remember when Elaine Chao actually confronted some of the protesters to defend her husband, the Senate Majority Leader?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Why did you leave my husband alone? Why are you separating families? Why did you leave my husband alone?
Well, she stood up for her husband, and Mitch McConnell, he's reacting ahead. And the president touting 6 months of tax cuts, as we just mentioned. But it was this woman who stole the show, sharing how the tax cut bonus is actually, it's not crumbs, she says, it's sending her kids to college. She's here live next. Yes, some quick headlines. It's the moment Toy Story fans have been waiting for. Today, Disney World is opening Toy Story Land, a new addition to their Orlando park based on the popular films. Guests will get the chance to experience life through the eyes of a toy. And as one real-life toy world is beginning, another coming to an end. Toys R Us posting a heartbreaking message as it closes its doors forever. The iconic retailer saying in part, promise us just this one thing, don't ever grow up, play on. The company closing all of its 735 U.S. stores after filing for bankruptcy. Abby?
Oh, makes me so sad. All right, thank you, Ed. End of an era. All right, President Trump celebrating 6 months of tax cuts, highlighting stories of everyday Americans and how they are benefiting from that law.
One incredible citizen who has benefited from our tax cuts. Lasagna Hill.
My family, we were able to invest in our children's education. I'm very honored to work for such a great company and for the company to benefit from such a great tax opportunity in which they were able to give back to the employees.
Lasagna Hill's standing ovation was the highlight of the president's event yesterday, and her story is one shared by many throughout the country. The tax cuts worked.
So joining us now is the star of yesterday's event, Lasagna Hill, an employee at Crowley Maritime in Jacksonville, Florida. Lasagna, it's great to have you with us. We all saw you yesterday, and really you had some pretty remarkable things to say. Look, you've heard the criticism of the tax cuts. It benefits the wealthy. It benefits corporations. You have a different story to tell. Walk us through how they've helped you.
Absolutely. Good morning. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for having me this morning. For sure, I can speak to my story personally. Some people say that it may not have benefited them being middle class, and I would say my family is middle class. What I know for sure is that the company that I work for, Crowley Maritime, a great company, they benefited from the tax reform. And by benefiting, they were able to pay employees bonuses that we were not anticipating being able to pay before the tax reform.
Lasagna, you were up there with your sons on stage with the with the president, and yes. Obviously they benefited as well.
Absolutely, they benefited because I received a bonus, and my family were able to take those funds and invest back into them. You know, invest back into their education, their future, which is definitely ultimately at the end of the day going to benefit them as a whole. As individuals who's looking to make a career upon graduation. So we're excited as a family, a middle class family, again, who was able to benefit so much from this opportunity.
You know, you hear your story, Lasagna, and it's a positive one. It makes you realize there are so many good things that are happening to people in this country, stories that we probably need to hear more from. What do you make of all the hate that's going on? It seems like President Trump can't do anything right when you watch much of the media, when you listen to a lot of Democrats who have a lot of complaints about the way things are going. How do you feel about that?
I really try to stay away from the hate. Nobody's ever going to see eye to eye. I think people have to realize that it's okay to have a difference of opinion, and you shouldn't make everyone's story to be your truth and your story. So I really try to stay away from the hate, and I tell my kids, and we have raised them to know that you do not base your judgment off of what someone else's experience was, because your experience is going to be your experience and their experience is going to be their experience.
Well, your sons have a wonderful mom.
And you did a great job speaking. You said you weren't a public speaker, but you did a great job speaking in front of the president and that huge, huge worldwide audience. Well done.
Thank you so much. Very much appreciate it.
Great to have you on this morning. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Coming up on the show, as the president was celebrating the tax cut event, some members of the media were trying to go after him.
Mr. President, will you stop calling us the enemy of the people, sir? Will you stop calling the press the enemy of the people, sir?
I'm sure that was the right time for that. We are going to discuss that episode next.
Plus, the left at it again. This time, someone arrested for threatening the FCC chairman. What that person did to land behind bars.
And anti-Trump hate now spreading north of the border. A restaurant refusing to serve someone just because, oh yes, they were wearing that hat.
Wow.
We saying oh, we oh, we oh, we oh. We saying oh, we oh, we oh, we oh. I wanna scream and shout and let it all out.
Welcome back. Well, a tight-knit community is now mourning the deaths of 5 people gunned down at their local newspaper.
Hundreds of people gathering at a candlelight vigil overnight to remember the victims of the Capital Gazette shooting.
Our own Griff Jenkins is live in Annapolis, Maryland, still reeling. A lot of people grieving there, dealing with this tragic case. Good morning, Griff. How's everybody doing?
Good morning, guys. Their morning. There were thousands actually turning out in every corner of Annapolis and multiple vigils last night. There were hugs, tears coming together as the daughter of one of the victims, Wendy Winters, had this to say, paying tribute to her mom.
She was an excellent reporter and an amazing woman, and she was doing what she loved. She was telling stories, and those stories should continue to be told.
And the tributes moving beyond Annapolis to Baltimore at Camden Yards last night, a moment of silence before the baseball game. And the Orioles tweeting this picture of the copy of the newspaper and 5 roses in the Capital Gazette's press box section. And it went all the way to Boston as well. The Patriots coach, Bill Belichick, issuing a statement saying that for my entire life, the Capitals have been my hometown newspaper. My family and I have enjoyed special relationships with many great people who have worked for the newspaper. Belichick, a native here of Annapolis. Meanwhile, in court yesterday, we got our first look at Jared Ramos, the gunman. He was wearing a green jumpsuit, standing eerily emotionless, saying nothing the entire time as the state's attorney, Wes Adams, made the case for the judge, ultimately denying Ramos bail. One of the details we learned that's new was that Ramos barricaded the back door to the exit here where this tragic shooting happened. Guys?
Griff, outstanding report. I forgot, Bill Belichick's father was a football coach a long time at the Naval Academy there in Annapolis. It's nice of you to highlight that because obviously he feels that, as a lot of people who are near Annapolis, but frankly people around the world feel. What a horrible situation.
Thank you, Griff. And the response from the Annapolis police, how quickly they got there. I mean, the lives that they probably saved in that process.
But what's interesting is there were some in the media who were just itching to blame it on President Trump, no matter what. And say, well, he's been attacking the media, so did it create an environment? Is there a climate out there? And then we find out, well, this person who's now been charged, I don't even want to say his name, had a long time dispute with this newspaper that clearly predates President Trump being in office, let alone running for office. But that's not stopping some from trying to say, you know, did the president do something wrong?
Well, it's not just there. There have been attacks on really any issue of the day, right? And yesterday it was focused on tax reform because it was the 6-month anniversary of putting these tax reforms forward. So in that moment, when everyone was sort of focused on that, Jim Acosta, who you know at CNN, took that opportunity to ask about something else. Do we have the sound?
Mr. President, will you stop calling us the enemy of the people, sir? Will you stop calling the press the enemy of the people, sir?
If you can't hear me saying, are you done with calling the press the enemy of the people? Obviously, that had nothing to do with the tax reform. And then he turns around and looks at the camera. But it just, every time I see Jim Acosta, at least most of the time I see him in these exchanges, it seems to be about getting that moment, a moment where he can get the spotlight, he can get the attention. It didn't used to be that way, Ed. It used to be the press briefings. It was about getting information from the White House. You can have these back and forths, but now it seems like it is all about who can get that moment of attention.
And whether you make yourself the story or not. And what the president actually said, he didn't say the entire media was the enemy of the American people. His tweet just over a year ago was, fake news media is the enemy of the American people. Now, some people may not see a difference between that, but there is a difference. He's talking about the fake news, the stories that are not true that attack him. But people want to stir things up no matter what.
I want to know who the shusher was. The guy who turned around and was like, shush. I don't know. Whoever that was cracked me up. But yeah, Acosta does obviously put himself in. He becomes the story. And is that an old thing? I mean, you've questioned presidents before.
No, I mean, look, sometimes there have been events where the president's doing something on taxes, and that might not be the story of the day. There's something else you want to ask about, and then you get frustrated that you're changing the subject. But if there's a question you got to ask, you sometimes annoy him, but you ask a tough question. In that case, I'm not sure anybody was dying to know what the president thought about the media when you're talking taxes and when he had nothing to do with what happened in Annapolis.
I think he was trying to link it. I mean, that's what it looks like.
Yeah. Well, let us know what you think. Friends@foxnews.com. Was that the appropriate question and timing for that moment? What do you think in general of these exchanges between the president and the media? Would love your thoughts. But there is other news going on this morning. I do want to bring you that. A man is behind bars Now accused of threatening to kill FCC Chairman Ajit Pai's family over his role in ending net neutrality, the Justice Department says that the suspect named Makara Mann sent Pai 3 threatening emails. One of them listed the names and addresses of 3 preschools near Pai's Virginia home, followed by, quote, "I will find your children and I will kill them." The man faces 10 years in prison if he's convicted. Unbelievable. An anti-Trump restaurant manager north of the border is fired for refusing to serve a customer wearing a MAGA hat. The manager, Darren Hodge, telling a customer at the Tea House in Vancouver, Canada, to take his hat off. Hodge claims that the MAGA hat symbolizes racism and bigotry. The restaurant saying that they fired Hodge for violating its tolerance policy. Also, the confrontation between Mitch McConnell's wife and protesters is taking the internet by storm. Watch this.
Why are you separating families? Why did you leave my husband alone? Why are you separating families? Why did you leave my husband alone?
The Senate Majority Leader says that he's proud of his wife, Elaine Chao, who wasn't afraid to give them a piece of her mind.